time for our very exciting panel on all things sports-related themes, led today by our moderator, Dan Corso, who's president of the Atlanta Sports Council. He will introduce our speaker, John Christick, in a moment or two, but those of you who may not know something about Dan, let me tell you about his long list of accomplishments. So Dan joined the Atlanta Sports Council in 1999 after serving as vice chair of the festival division for the 1998 Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. It's come a long way since those days. The Atlanta Sports Council mission is to facilitate the growth and development of sports in Metro Atlanta by serving as a recruiter for major regional, national, and international sporting events. Nothing is bigger than the FIFA World Cup, right? The organization plays an important role in improving the quality of life for residents in the region through sports, working to drive economic growth and visibility, and acting as an advocate for the area, teams, and annual sporting events. I'm reminded of what my hero Nelson Mandela said: if you want to solve the world's problems, put people on the sports field, because they'll figure it out. So the Sports Council's accomplishments under Dan include hosting several prominent sporting events such as the NCAA Men's and Women's Final Four, Major League Baseball, NHL, and the NBA All-Star Games. WrestleMania 27? Wow. And the ACC and SEC basketball tournaments. Most recently, the Atlanta Sports Council managed the effort to successfully recruit the 2018 College Football Playoff National Championship, the Super Bowl in 2019. We all remember Roger Goodell coming to speak to our club, and the 2020 NCAA Men's Final Four. So Dan today leads as host of the College Football Commission for 2025 and also for the city's 2026 World Cup efforts. So is there more to sports than trying to chase down the Phillies or hoping that the Falcons will actually have a winning season? Come on up to the stage and introduce John.
Okay, I'm gonna go off script here. Anna, I've got a scarf for you. This is an Atlanta Host Committee World Cup scarf. As a new member, but also as a fan of soccer and going to the 2010 World Cup, there you go, you're part of the family. There you go, good to have you.
I suspect she really wants a ticket.
There's one, you wanna put yours on?
I said I suspect she really wants a ticket to the semi.
Well, we'll talk about that, yeah. Not so fast, we'll see how that goes. Okay, so great to be with all of you today and to talk a little sports here. I'm not huge on preamble, so John's got a really long bio, and I'm just going to tell you what he does. John is the president of Premier Sports and their consulting division. He has 30 years of experience going back into sports marketing all across the world. He resides in Maryland, went to George Mason University, is married, and has 3 children. And in full disclosure, I've known John since 2008, and I'm so thankful to be able to call him a friend. We started working together back in 08-09 when the U.S. made the effort to try to get the 2018 and 2022 World Cup. We all know how that happened, but John and I worked on that together, and we've known each other ever since. And he's currently serving as an advisor to our host committee here, which I lead here in Atlanta. So John, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Great, Dan.
So just to kind of set the tone for the FIFA World Cup in 2026, we have a video that we're going to show, and then we'll come out of it and have a little conversation together.
$500 million people from every background and belief and every corner of the world, in 3 countries, across 1 continent, united in friendship and respect, to host the single greatest sporting event in the world. Expanding the FIFA World Cup to 48 countries is brave, it's bold, and it will define the future of football, but it has to be done right. More than 1,000 players and millions of fans can be certain that Canada, Mexico, and the United States are ready to welcome you and deliver an extraordinary experience. Non-stop flights to our hundreds of airports, world-class transportation that's easy and affordable, millions of hotel rooms for every budget, and unforgettable host cities, from Toronto to Seattle to Monterey. Players will arrive to 150 elite training sites and base camps, iconic stadiums, and state-of-the-art venues that are already built. The highest quality fields, all natural grass on every pitch, and an average capacity of more than 68,000 seats, 9,500 luxury suite and box seating.
We're also planning something special for 2026, an opening day like no other. One match in each of our 3 countries on the same day.
3 matches, 3 nations, with hundreds of thousands of fans in the stands. An 80-match competition with the best possible schedule that puts players first. Millions of fans at fan fests across the continent, and our incredible diversity will make every game feel like a home game. United as one. Canada, Mexico, and the United States are ready to join with FIFA and your member associations to shape the future of football. United 2026. Football for all. We're ready to welcome you.
Yeah, as you said, flashback. That video still holds up. You saw a lot of shots of Atlanta here. I remember when you all came to town to film some of that. So let's back up. So John is responsible for the FIFA World Cup coming to North America. He's really why we're sitting here talking about Atlanta, if you really want to go back, because John led that effort on behalf of North America to pitch FIFA as to why North America should be the destination for the 2026 event. And to give a little context to that video, John, why don't you talk a little bit? But that was actually the pitch video, was it not?
Yeah, that video is quite a flashback in and of itself. That was played in Moscow on the eve of the World Cup in Russia, when the United States, Canada, and Mexico was competing against Morocco in the final stage of the hosting competition. That was part of a final pitch video. And those of you who follow all the details, you would have noticed a few nuances in there. The tournament itself has actually grown. There, they proposed it as 80 matches. It's now 104 matches. And you would have noticed 1 or 2 stadiums in there that ultimately didn't come through in the final selection process. But no, the bid in of itself was quite a fascinating experience. No one kind of trains in school or in your profession to kind of get involved in a sports bid of this level. I kind of fell into it. My career goes back 35 years now. Was first with the World Cup when it was here in the U.S. in 1994. And I worked for a Swiss firm that had an office outside of Washington, D.C., and they looked after all of the kind of commercial issues, particularly around sponsorship and broadcasting. And they invited me over to Europe after that successful World Cup, and my career then spanned for 15 years, always working around FIFA and other major events, particularly on the commercial side of it. But when I moved back to the U.S. in 2008, with my wife and 3 children who were born in Switzerland, my first kind of coming home was the U.S. were looking to bid, as Dan mentioned, for the 2018 or the 2022 World Cup. And it just so happened that I had known a few people from World Cup '94, and my background working around FIFA ticked the boxes, so they brought me on as managing director. Quite an experience. We did not win the right to host the 2022 World Cup, for those of you who watched it when it was in Qatar. And many, many books have been written about the process that was carried out. And needless to say, it was quite a frustrating experience for us. But you know, we licked our wounds. We all went back to our day jobs for 5 or 6 years in between, and we stayed in contact. And I was called in end of 2017 and given the message that the U.S. was going to bid again for the 26th World Cup. And I was asked to be the executive director of that bid. It was only after I accepted it that they told me that we were also going to bid with Canada and Mexico. But that was a small detail.
It was fine print.
That was a small print.
Read that part of the email?
Yeah. But one thing that was interesting is the gentleman who called me, his name was Sunil Gulati. At the time, he was president of the U.S. Soccer Federation. And I said to him, Sunil, what makes us think it's going to be different this time? And he had said, listen, we were only going to bid if I had the assurances that it was going to be different. The fundamental difference between the 22 World Cup bid process and the 26 one, is that the 22 bid process was decided by 24 members of the FIFA Executive Committee. And it was votes behind closed doors. They were all secret votes. And it was, quite frankly, not a transparent process at all. For the 26th World Cup, there was a new FIFA president, and the fundamental difference that they made is it would be an open vote amongst all members of the FIFA membership, was 206 countries. So that level of transparency gave us enough confidence that putting forward a second bid was going to be worth the effort, and that we felt that we would be judged on the merits and not be caught in the politics. So what's involved with putting a bid of that level together? You're faced with probably submission of 1,000 pages of documentation. My job was primarily organizing all of the host cities into a collective group, organizing all of the necessary venues that had to be submitted as part of the bid. So whether it's the stadiums, whether it's the training sites, whether it's the team base camps, whether it's the airport authorities, and doing that across all of the cities that are going to take part. Tremendous amount of work in human rights, sustainability, federal government guarantees across 3 countries. So guarantees that cross everything from State Department to Department of Homeland Security, et cetera. So my job was really pulling all that together, putting it in a box with a bow on it, and then allowing the process amongst the voters of the FIFA delegation to take part. So that video was played in June, and we were successful, and at that point we were able to start the planning exercise that we're now midway through.
And that was 2018, right, when they decided?
Yeah, that was 2018.
So we began on this process July 7th, 2017 was the first correspondence that John and I had about this effort. And that's where our history then begins for 2026. So Adrian mentioned earlier that the city and region have got this incredible history of hosting just incredible major sporting events, really the biggest in the world, even going back to the Olympics in '96 as we're seeing in Paris. And there's really a reason for that. There's multiple reasons, but one thing that we're finding the same from each of these events is our continuity in the organization. So Adrian mentioned I head up the host committees for the CFP Championship coming up, and then of course the World Cup. And then we've got representatives from organizations at the City of Atlanta, the Atlanta Sports Council, the Stadium, the Georgia World Congress Center, the Metro Atlanta Chamber, the ACVB, all part of that host committee. So we're working these events. And what we're finding efficient is that when we have a meeting on, say, 25 CFP planning, we then get right into the 26 World Cup. So that continuity, I think, is very helpful. That's a similarity. What's different for us, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the differences between this World Cup and some of the others that you've seen since '94, is this is the same event over 11 U.S. cities over the same time period. And we're finding that we can collaborate amongst cities, which is very refreshing. I've been doing this for 25 years now, and this is the first time where we're all holding the same event at the same time. And there's a lot of best practices happening across a number of different levels in the planning for the U.S. cities. But from your perspective, it's a long way. What are the differences that you're seeing as from this event from other big World Cups?
No, I think it's a really good point to make. There's a couple of key differences with this World Cup than previous ones. First of all, the size, okay? The World Cup in 1994, how many people remember how many teams were there? It was 24 teams, 52 matches, okay? We're now 48 teams, 104 matches. We had 9 host cities in 1994. We now have 16, 11 of which are in the United States. Even during the bid process, one of the things I'm quite proud of is the unification of the cities and getting them all aligned. I always said during the bid, we were only as strong as our weakest link. If we had one city or multiple cities who weren't happy with the process, who felt it wasn't going to be a great opportunity for them, and they broke away, that could have really been the end of our bid. And I look back, and I love our friends in Boston, but if you look at what happened with their Olympic effort, their bid that they made, and suddenly the community turned against it and everything got very, very negative. But I think the groundwork that we played during the 22 bid that we didn't win and the 26 bid that we were successful in is what Dan is benefiting from today, is you really have an incredibly close group of host cities. Another major difference, though, for this World Cup from previous ones, again, historically, FIFA always set the standards for an event of this level. They had a lot of blueprints for how the events were going to be organized, but then they bestowed that trust into a local organizing committee that would have had a leader from that country, or countries in our case, who would have then been the advocate on part of all of the different cities to ensure that FIFA standards were being applied, and would also be that communication back to FIFA when there were issues that they were not clarified around or issues that they had to negotiate. That model's gone for 2026. This will be the first World Cup that there is no local organizing committee, so each of the different host cities are dealing direct with FIFA. FIFA have invested in its own operations team in Coral Gables, Florida, so they are staffing up aggressively, okay, to build an organization that's able to work with all the different host cities. So that's something new. It's something that for a lot of reasons makes sense, okay, because FIFA's not having to go through an intermediary. They have the blueprint for how these events need to be run in terms of accreditation, in terms of transportation, in terms of ticketing, etc. So from that standpoint, it's good. The risk of it is they're building an organization from scratch. They're having to deal with 16 different cities who all have different needs and interests at the same time. So this is something that I'm confident will get pulled off, but it's also a massive undertaking, particularly when you consider the fact that we're dealing with 3 countries, from Vancouver to Miami, from Foxborough to Monterey. And that's why that relationship that Dan talked about with the host cities is so fundamental, because FIFA can't give them everything they need. So a lot of times what you have is Dan relying on his relationships in Dallas or his relationships in Los Angeles or New York and New Jersey to compare notes, to say, listen, how are you going to be addressing this? And you're almost helping educate FIFA a little bit because of the strength of our market and the way our host cities are.
Yeah, and FIFA's aware that the cities are talking and collaborating, so that does help in some way. So let's go back. FIFA's analyzing the bid that you put forth. You had, I think it was 48 cities from the U.S. as part of it, and then it got cut down to 32, and then the 16, I think, total. So let's talk about the sport itself, because I believe one of FIFA's motivations of naming North America as a host, crazy, is that they wanted to grow the sport, right? And it's already the most popular sport. So they saw this as an opportunity to continue to grow it. How important was the soccer story of each of the cities as part of that bid? Because, here in Atlanta, it goes back to us in, say, 2017 when the stadium was built. Atlanta United came online. 2018, Atlanta United won the MLS Cup. We hosted the All-Star game for MLS. Then you fast forward to last year, we had the English Premier League Summer Series. And then you go to this year, we've now announced that Atlanta is the home to the U.S. Soccer's National Training Center and headquarters. The U.S. women's team played in the She Believes Cup this past April. We've hosted 2 Copa matches. Someone mentioned Copa. And just last week, Chelsea played in a friendly last Wednesday at the stadium. So we've got a really great soccer story. How important was that for the cities that you were considering?
It was fundamental. It was interesting, right after 22 and we lost again. It was a very difficult time for everybody. And fast forward then when we were involved with the 26 bid, I remember saying, I don't know whether the cities will take my call, okay? I had great relationships there, but we lost, and it was a very, very hard loss. But it amazed me, every one of them. I think you were the first or second call that I made. We're in, we're back into this, which again, I think is a testament not only of the significance of this event, but how much this sport has evolved and grown. If you go back to World Cup 94, okay, MLS did not exist at that time. In fact, MLS was one of the conditions for the U.S. being awarded the rights to host in 1994. FIFA had seen this as the last frontier, or one of the last frontiers for the sport. And yes, there had been efforts in the past to get professional soccer up and running, but it had not really lit fire. So after World Cup 94, you then had MLS. We've seen MLS growth. Okay, we've seen the success story that we have here in Atlanta. We see what's happened with NWSL. I would say that none of that would have happened if it wouldn't have been for the World Cup in 1994. So fast forward to where we're at today, the stories that you have on how the sport has capitalized on that growth. FIFA definitely sees this as the second half. Okay, where will hosting a World Cup in North America in 2026 take us 10, 20 years from now? I would say today the U.S. is FIFA's #1 market economically in the world, okay? In terms of broadcast rights fees, in terms of the number of sponsors that come out of this market, in terms of the commercial potential that they'll realize from this World Cup. So financially, it's already there. Even from the sports standpoint, the challenge with the sport in our country is you got to look at it through many, many different lenses. If you go to other strong soccer countries, whether it's Brazil or whether it's Germany or take England, everything is through the national team, through the professional league, down to the local club that you supported and everything else. Here, we have that, but we also have La Liga on TV every day. We've got Bundesliga on TV. We've got EPL doing their mornings lives event. There are so many different lenses that you have to look at the sport here. Commercially, that's fantastic. Popularity of the game, it's fantastic. It's just a little bit harder to get your arms around if you're trying to, own it or control the whole thing. Whereas the NFL is very clear. You go through the NFL, you go down to the teams, okay, you've got college over here, you've got high school, it's very clear. So the potential for the sport to go even further, absolutely. Cities like Atlanta, where you've done so much and you've got such a success story to say, where will it go in the next 5, 10, 20 years? This World Cup is going to set the stage for all of that.
So the schedule's on the screen, right? We have 8 matches beginning June 15th, 5 group stage matches all the way from June 15th through June 27. It's basically one every 3 days. Then we get a little bit of a break until July 1st. We have our first knockout round of 32, and then July 7th we have our round of 16, and then on July 15th we've got our semifinal, and we're one of 2 semifinal cities, Dallas being the other, and the finals are in New York. So 8 matches, announced earlier this year in February. Couldn't have been happier, right? We were thinking maybe 6 or 7, but when the 8 popped up, we're super excited and really psyched to get the semifinal. We wanted the final. FIFA has a stadium capacity requirement of 80,000 or more, and we tried like hell to get 80,000 in Brazil. We just couldn't find a way to do it. But got close, got in the mid-70s, so semifinals, wonderful. So let's talk a little preparation. So I talked a little bit about our host committee and the organizations that are involved in our host committee, and we're working closely with FIFA. We've done work thus far on transportation planning. The public safety security planning is starting to take shape. That'll continue on through the fall. The feds will weigh in on that, and so they'll have a lot to say in those plans for public safety and security. We're looking at our Fan Fest and what that could look like. What are you telling cities to kind of look for now? We're 2 years out, just a little less than 2 years out. We believe, according to FIFA, that we're on track. What are you hearing in other cities?
Well, I think there's usually multiple stages for these events. There's the political phase, which was the campaign, the bid itself. Then there was a lot of planning. Okay, FIFA's building its organization. The host cities are getting themselves organized. They're going through a lot of the different requirements day in and day out across all the different work streams that are going to be necessary. We're very quickly now moving into the operational phase. So even as soon as, I'd say, September, October this year, you'll start to see a lot of marketing for the event. All the commercial hospitality sales will start end of this year. So FIFA has appointed a third party who is going to be offering all of the suites, all of the premium package and everything else. That's all going to be going into market at the end of this year. Over the course of 2025, a lot of these operational areas are really going to light up. FIFA will start deploying staff into the local markets to work hand in hand with Dan and the other host cities. Okay, you're also going to be seeing a big push, obviously, with the 1 year out. So in June of next year, you're also going to have the Club World Cup that's going to be in the U.S. as well. You're going to be in that 1 year out. Public ticket sales will start October, November of next year, of 25.
Through FIFA.
Through FIFA. FIFA will manage all of the ticket sales. And then the big thing that everyone's going to be waiting for is the final draw. The final draw is when the teams are actually selected from the pairings. So you'll know what group stage matches will be here on the 15th. You'll know all of and that's when all the final push. And then you're 6 months out to the event.
And that's December of 25 when they do the final draw. So one more question for you, John, and then we've got a trivia to give away a scarf. We'll go back to the beginning. credit to you and your team that you built with the United Bid Committee to get this here. Again, I say it, this is why we're talking about it. When everything is done, at the end of the tournament, what do you think success will be for North America in hosting this event?
I mean, obviously, I want to see the sport continue to develop. I'd love to see the U.S. team advanced as far as possible through the tournament. I have one thing that I look at is how many people in our industry will benefit from a World Cup. The whole next generation of those people who will be volunteers, who will be working for host committees, who will be working for FIFA. When I first got involved in the World Cup back in 1994, I didn't know that much about soccer. I didn't know that much about big events. But in so many events that I go to speak to, I say, well, how many of you were involved? How did you get involved? And where their careers have gone. And I think this will, again, be something that I look at is how many people who want to get into the sports business, who have the chance to taste that with an event of this magnitude and where it takes their careers.
Yeah, I love that, and I think of that like locally. Like it's like, how cool is it going to be to see like downtown come to life during that period? I mean, Brian and Centennial Yards and Hala with Woodruff Arts Center and State Farm Arena, and FIFA-approved watch parties, which again underline FIFA-approved watch parties all throughout the region and the state, celebrating this great event. We haven't even mentioned Coca-Cola product placement. Yep. One of FIFA's longest global partners calls Atlanta home. Big part of our host committee helping us on the Fan Fest. And all of it really is just to try to build that momentum for 2031 and potentially getting the Women's World Cup, right? So, I mean, it's just going to be a great journey. And
it's the first we've mentioned Fan Fest, and everybody has in their mind what they think a Fan Fest will be at a World Cup. But just Google it, okay? Do Seoul, Korea Fan Fest semifinal, okay? And look at some of the imagery. Or go back to Germany 2006, where they had 1 million people. Okay, or look at the Argentina welcome, after the last World Cup. The passion that comes with this event, okay, is just overwhelming. And for everybody, whether you're a small business owner or whether you have a large business, there are opportunities you should be thinking about in terms of how your business itself can capitalize on a World Cup. If you're a restaurateur, in terms of how you're going to be tailoring your menus, for a World Cup. Everybody's going to see benefit, from this event. You just got to do your planning and be ready.
So we've referenced 1994 a couple of times. So we do have a scarf to give away. Check your phones for Google. I'll give you a second to pull them out. 1994, there were 9 host cities. Atlanta was not one of them. One city in particular hosted the opening match. Germany won that match versus Bolivia. Can anyone tell me what city hosted the opening match at the 94 Men's World Cup? No, close. Did I hear Midwest?
I've not heard it yet.
Boom, Chicago. Whoever said Chicago. There you go.
Come on,
Chicago, that was it.
Congratulations.
John, there you go. Thank you all for allowing us to be with you. And John, thanks for your leadership.
Pleasure.
Thanks for what you did for North America.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much for a compelling program. Come. I'd like to open it up to questions from members and visiting Rotarians. I know there are a bunch of you, so go ahead.
Thank you. Almost every stadium has got a sponsor. FIFA has sponsors.
Yeah.
They may not be the same.
They do not.
So what will happen when Mercedes-Benz Stadium is hosting 8 games and it's Mercedes-Benz Stadium?
Which will then be called Atlanta Stadium and Dallas Stadium and New York Stadium. Correct, John? You want to talk through that?
And quite frankly, that was part of the bid requirements from day one. If you're an Olympics or if you're a World Cup or your other major events, whether it's Champions League or whether it's the European Championships, those are consistent requirements. So from day one, it was one of the very first things I spoke to Dan about and every other host city we're going to take part is, listen, we have to abide by FIFA's Clean Stadium guidelines, which does require that any naming rights partner, or quite frankly, any commercial partner that's recognized in that stadium would go dark during the World Cup.
But Jim, it's a good question. I mean, if there is a sponsor that's a partner of FIFA that coincides with the naming rights partner of the stadium, then they would stay.
But even if it were the Coke Stadium, FIFA would still say
They
no, it
name it
becomes the
Atlanta Stadium.
It's the Atlanta Stadium. So even amongst FIFA's commercial structure, they have a very parity-based program in terms of who's recognized within the stadium.
Sounds like a very powerful organization. Dave, Dave, come on up.
Thank you very much. I'm visiting Rotary from Roswell, and my volunteer role with Rotary is a global initiative to end modern slavery and human trafficking. And I know part of the protocol to get the World Cup in these different cities was what's your position on human trafficking. And I just want you to know that we've got an amazing team in Canada and Mexico. Here, we've already got teams in place to help volunteer on this issue. Also serving the Grace Commission with Marty Kemp, the great First Lady here. So just let us know how we can help support your efforts as far as that go. We've got the teams in place and love to see how we can support you.
Thank you. I'd love to connect with you afterwards. Thank you.
Dan, do you have comments on that?
No, it is part of the requirements, right, through FIFA that we have to have. And that's not different than any other big event, whether it's a Super Bowl or a CFP. You have to have a plan in place.
Chloe?
Hi, my question is very similar. It's so Dan, are you the one that's responsible or coordinating everything to make sure we have a fantastic Atlanta experience?
Yes.
Well,
Would you like to switch jobs?
No. I want to make sure we're all here to support you because we're so excited.
Yeah, thank you.
So can I piggyback off of Chloe's question? Thank you for your leadership in bringing these great events to our city. And Atlanta's going to be ready. So my son says, Dad, you don't have to teach me adversity. I support Atlanta sports teams, right?
There you go. Perfect.
We're always going to be ready. We're going to be ready for the FIFA World Cup. As you sit in your seat, to Chloe's point, beyond human trafficking and everything else, what keeps you up at night? Where's the biggest gap between where we're at today and where we need to be? And how can this club and business leaders and civic leaders help you get there?
So I'm thankful we don't really have a lot of gaps right now, and I'm taking that based on the feedback from FIFA as we go through the planning process with them and meet with them, and they know that this city knows how to host big events based on our history, and we've got the right people around the table from the right organizations. What I wish could happen more often is there are a lot of really good people and a lot of good organizations that want to be a part of the planning. We just don't have that many project items to go around at this point in time to make everybody involved. But once we get something, we'd love to get people involved. So I think volunteerism is the way. And this is an opportunity for whether it's as an individual or big companies or small companies. If you want your employees to be involved in this, we're going to need volunteers. And we're working with FIFA on what that plan will be, the number of volunteers, the roles of the volunteers. And we'll roll that out sometime in 2025 according to the FIFA timeline. But whether it's airport greeters at the hotels, wayfinders, just showing that Southern hospitality that we're known for, that's a way to get people involved in that. And I would love to continue the conversations with the companies in this room.
We'll do that. You heard that call to action. We have time for one more question.
Great, thank you. Thank you, guys. You did a great job. Let me ask you, you mentioned Atlanta about 700 times. What about the rest of Georgia? We'd love to there's a bunch of what can we do with the rest of Georgia?
Well, we talked about that, and back to the volunteerism. It doesn't have to be City of Atlanta or the companies in this room. It could metro-wide. It could be the state of Georgia. It could be throughout the Southeast. We can call. But watch parties and Fan Fest, I think, are opportunities for other parts of Metro Atlanta, whether it's Alpharetta and Avalon, Gwinnett, Cobb County at the Battery, or cities across the state, Savannah, Macon, Augusta, Columbus, Rome, wherever it may be. FIFA just has very strict guidelines on what those Fan Fests can be and what they can look like, the do's and don'ts. And once we have those, we'll distribute those. They're supposed to come at the end of the year. Once we have them, we'll distribute those who are interested and see what we can create. But yeah, we want everyone around here to be able to celebrate it. The matches will be held in downtown at the stadium. Mm-hmm. But there's no sense that you can't do a viewing party or a viewing or watch party in your own community.
Yeah, timely reminder, we want to be inclusive to the rest of the state. Yes. So last question for John, probably the most controversial question. Who's the GOAT, Pele or Messi? Was that part of the FIFA question? Come on.
If you ask my kids, it's clearly Messi. Okay, it's hard to deny his impact on the game right now.
Well, thank you for flying down to be with us today, Dan. Thank you for leading us in this discussion. It was very, very helpful. We'll get a photograph in a moment. Just before we adjourn, a quick reminder of our upcoming programs. Next week, please join us for an expert. We're very, very excited to have Kevin Tanner, who's the Commissioner of the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, and he'll be speaking to us about the importance of mental health in Georgia. Interestingly, he is also the trustee for Georgia's $638 billion opioid settlement fund. Think about that. With distribution starting this year to combat the deadly epidemic in our state. So that is something we can really lean into. We're then going to have a fireside chat with former Governor Deal and past President Stephanie Blank, focusing on children's literacy and the importance of funding for pre-K education in Georgia, right in line with our theme of early childhood education. And then finally, another sports-related program as the Tour Championship comes to town. So we'll be talking about the PGA, and what Atlanta has done to host that and how our community can be impacted for the benefit. So with that, meeting adjourned.